Late at night, when the world quiets down, there's always that one corner of the internet that doesn't sleep. Reddit, a place where strangers share their darkest experiences. The kind that make you double-check your locks and question what's really watching you through the glow of your screen. The stories you're about to hear were all posted by real users, ordinary people who claimed these things actually happened. Most of those accounts are gone now, deleted, but the posts remain, archived, re-uploaded, and whispered about in corners of the web that shouldn't exist. Tonight, we're diving into 4 of those stories. 4 real encounters that started as harmless Reddit posts and ended as something no one could explain. These are 4 real scary stories from Reddit. Make sure you're not watching this alone. And whatever you do, don't scroll down. Story 1. The Knock at 3 a.m. Setting: Kentucky, 2019. Ethan Marlowe had lived in that farmhouse for only 6 months when it began. The property sat deep in the Kentucky hills, 30 acres of quiet woods, a gravel road that vanished into mist, and no neighbors for nearly a mile in any direction. It was perfect for someone who wanted silence. He'd left the city for peace, for space. But at 3 a.m. on a cold November morning, peace was the last thing he felt. It started with 3 slow knocks on the back door. They were steady, even, not a frantic pounding, not the sound of wind or branches. Someone was knocking, like they were testing the sound. Ethan woke instantly. He wasn't sure why at first. It was the kind of sound that cuts through dreams and roots itself in your chest. He sat up in bed. The only light came from the moon spilling through the thin curtains. His dog, Murphy, lifted his head, ears twitching. Then came the second set of knocks. 3. Again. Murphy began to growl. Deep, low, uncertain. Ethan glanced at the clock, 3:03 a.m., and told himself it was probably a raccoon or maybe a lost driver. But when the third set came, 3 precise knocks, spaced evenly apart, something in the rhythm felt wrong. Too deliberate, too patient. He reached for the revolver he kept by his nightstand, his father's old Colt. Then, barefoot and tense, he walked through the hall. The farmhouse creaked around him like an old ship. The wooden floors groaned under his weight. The air felt heavier near the kitchen, as though the temperature had dropped several degrees. When he reached the back door, he stopped. Through the frosted glass, a shape stood in the darkness, human-sized, motionless. The porch light should have illuminated it, but the bulb had burned out days ago. All Ethan could see was a faint outline, the shape of a head, a shoulder, and one arm lifted toward the glass. He cleared his throat and said, "Who's there?" No answer. Murphy barked once, then stopped abruptly, tail between his legs. Ethan stepped closer. "Hey, you need help." Still nothing. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. It was as though it were listening. Then the knocks came again, right against the glass, soft this time, almost polite. 3. Slow knocks. Ethan felt the air vibrate in his chest with each one. He pulled the curtain aside an inch, and his breath caught. The person wasn't facing the door anymore. They were turned toward the wall, their head tilted slightly, as if listening to something inside the house. Every instinct in him screamed to run, to lock himself in a room and call for help. But curiosity, and something colder, something like dread, held him there. "Listen, I'm armed," he said, voice shaking. "If you try anything." The sentence died in his throat because the shape moved, not turning or stepping away, but flickering, like a shadow under a strobe light. For a heartbeat, there was no one there. Then it was closer, pressed against the glass. Ethan stumbled back, heart pounding. He raised the revolver but couldn't see a face, only a pale suggestion of one. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher that someone was outside. The woman's voice was calm. "Stay on the line, sir. We're sending a unit." But as she spoke, another sound began. Faint at first, then rising, knocking from the other side of the house. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, coming from the front door. Ethan froze. The dispatcher asked, "Sir, are you still there?" He didn't answer. He was moving now, stepping quietly through the hall, revolver trembling in his hand. When he reached the front entryway, he saw the brass handle twitch. Just once. Then the same 3 knocks, echoing through the wood. Murphy was whimpering now, backing into the living room. Ethan tried to speak. "Who are you?" But before he could finish, a whisper drifted through the door. "You left it open." He stopped breathing, because the voice wasn't coming from outside. It was behind him. He spun around, nothing there. Just the dim light from the hallway. The back door, the one with the frosted glass, was now ajar. Cold air moved through the house like a slow exhale. "Murphy?" he called out. No response. Only the sound of claws scratching somewhere deeper in the dark. Ethan stepped back toward the kitchen, whispering his dog's name again. He could see his own breath now, the air so cold it shimmered. From the corner of his eye, something shifted. A shadow moved across the wall, not in front of a light source, but like it had a body of its own. The knocks started again, but this time they came from inside the walls. 3 slow knocks. Ethan's phone slipped from his hand. He raised the revolver, pointing it at nothing. The sound echoed around him, as though the house itself were hollow and alive. The ceiling creaked. Picture frame fell and shattered. Then silence. He whispered, "What do you want?" The voice came from right beside his ear. "To come in." He turned and fired. The flash from the muzzle lit up the kitchen for a split second, and in that instant he saw it. A figure standing in the doorway, tall, thin, its skin as pale as paper, eyes black and wet, as though filled with ink. It didn't move when he fired again. The bullets hit the wall, splintering wood, but the thing just watched him. Then it smiled. The lights went out. When the sheriff's deputies arrived 40 minutes later, they found the house silent. The front and back doors were wide open. Murphy was on the porch, shaking uncontrollably but unharmed. Ethan was gone. No sign of struggle. No footprints outside. No tire tracks on the gravel road. The only clue was the kitchen wall. The deputies swore they heard faint tapping from inside it while they searched. 3 slow knocks. But when they tore the wall open, it was empty. Almost. At the center of the cavity, buried between the studs, they found a small section of old plaster with words scratched into it. 3 a.m. Let me in. Weeks later, a new family moved in. They replaced the doors, repainted the kitchen, fixed the insulation. But one night, the father woke to the sound of 3 knocks. He checked the clock. Exactly 3 a.m. Through the frosted glass of the back door, he saw the faint outline of a man standing outside, motionless. And though he couldn't explain why, he felt like the man was listening. Not for a voice, but for something deeper. For the sound of someone opening the door. Story 2. The Baby Monitor. Colorado, 2017. When Mark and Jenna Holloway moved into the old Victorian home on the edge of Loveland, Colorado, they called it a fresh start. After 3 miscarriages, they had finally welcomed their first child, Emma, just 4 months old. The house wasn't perfect. It was built in 1906, all creaking floors and drafty corners, but it had charm and space. Jenna loved the wraparound porch, and Mark loved that they could finally afford something of their own. They didn't know that the previous owners had left in the middle of the night. The first few nights were normal. Mark worked from home while Jenna spent most of her time in the nursery, humming softly to Emma, who slept under a mobile of paper stars. When they bought the baby monitor, a fancy model with 2-way audio and night vision, it gave Jenna peace of mind. She could check on Emma from anywhere in the house. It was on the 5th night that she first heard it. It was 2:41 a.m. Jenna stirred awake, half dreaming, when a faint sound came through the baby monitor. A voice. Soft, low, male. At first, she thought Mark was in the nursery. But when she reached over, he was still in bed beside her, snoring lightly. The voice came again. Shoo! Go back to sleep. Her body went cold. She sat up, clutching the monitor. The screen showed the nursery in grainy black and white. Emma's crib. The rocking chair. The curtains swaying slightly. No one else. The voice whispered again. Longer this time. broken by static. You don't have to cry anymore. Jenna's breath caught in her throat. Emma wasn't crying. She was sound asleep. Jenna shook Mark awake. Mark, someone's in her room. He was up instantly, grabbing the baseball bat he kept under the bed. They ran down the hall, burst into the nursery, and found nothing. The crib was empty. For one horrifying second, Jenna thought Emma was gone. But then she saw her, still in the crib, fast asleep, chest rising and falling peacefully. The room was cold, though. Too cold. The baby monitor camera light flickered twice, then went dead. The next morning, Mark checked the doors and windows. All locked. No signs of a break-in. He told Jenna it must have been interference. Maybe someone nearby using a similar frequency. She didn't argue, but the look in her eyes said she didn't believe it. That night, she unplugged the baby monitor. By the next evening, curiosity got the better of her. She plugged it back in. At 3:07 a.m., the monitor clicked on by itself. Static hissed through the speaker. Then faintly, "Why'd you turn me off?" Jenna's heart stopped. She grabbed the monitor and turned up the volume. The whisper came again, closer this time. "You can't keep me out." Then the camera feed flickered. The nursery was empty, but a shadow passed across the crib. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't her. She screamed, and Mark rushed in. But by the time he grabbed the monitor, the feed was back to normal. He wanted to throw the whole thing away, but Jenna refused. "If something's happening in there, I want to see it." Over the next few days, strange things began happening around the house. Emma's mobile would start spinning on its own. The baby monitor would turn on and whisper lullabies neither of them recognized. At 3 a.m., doors would creak open, and Mark would swear he heard faint crying coming from the attic, even though Emma was asleep in her crib. On the 7th night, Mark decided to check the monitor's recording feature. He scrolled back through the footage and froze when he saw the timestamp. 3:09 a.m. There was movement in the nursery. A faint, human-shaped figure was standing beside the crib. Transparent, pale, swaying slightly like a curtain in the wind. His head was tilted down toward Emma. Mark muted the video before Jenna could hear the faint lullaby playing under the static. A woman's voice, slow and gentle, repeating a single phrase over and over. "Don't cry, my baby. Don't cry, my baby." He deleted the clip, but he couldn't delete the sound from his mind. The next night, Jenna woke to Emma crying. Really crying this time, loud and sharp. She bolted down the hallway, but before she reached the nursery, the crying stopped. When she pushed the door open, her daughter was asleep again, but the rocking chair beside the crib was moving. Slowly, rhythmically, Jenna whispered, "Mark." He appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. They both stood frozen as the chair rocked, the baby monitor light blinking on the dresser. Then a woman's humming filled the room. Soft at first, then louder as if she were standing right between them. "Hush now, little one." Jenna grabbed Emma and ran, screaming for Mark to get out. He followed her downstairs, slamming the nursery door shut behind him. The next morning, they called the police. The officers checked the entire house. Attic, basement, crawl spaces. They found nothing. But when one of the officers stepped into the nursery, he frowned. The baby monitor, which Mark swore he'd unplugged, was on again. And on its tiny black and white screen was a woman's face. Pale, hollow-eyed, smiling faintly. The feed wasn't live. It was frozen, like a still frame. When the officer tried to turn it off, the device sparked and died in his hand. That night, Jenna refused to sleep in the house. They packed a few bags, drove to a motel outside town, and left the monitor behind. But at 3 a.m., in the motel room, the monitor app on Mark's phone pinged. Feed active, nursery camera. He stared at the screen, horrified. The baby monitor was hundreds of miles away, unplugged, and yet the feed was live. On the screen, Emma's empty crib sat in the dark. The mobile spun slowly. Then, from the edge of the frame, the woman's face leaned in toward the camera. She smiled. "You left her alone." The feed cut to black. Mark smashed the phone. They never went back to the house. The property went back up for sale 6 months later. The listing agent mentioned that the previous owners, a couple named Sanders, had lost their baby to sudden infant death syndrome back in 1985. The police report mentioned something odd. When the coroner removed the crib from the nursery, they found an old baby monitor wedged behind the wall, wires corroded, speakers still intact, and etched into the plastic in faint letters were the words, "Don't cry, my baby." Story 3. The Passenger. Posted by you/Road Trip Ruin. Setting: Northern Arizona, 2012. Jake and Aaron had been best friends since high school, the kind of friends who could sit in silence for hours and still call it a good time. In the summer of 2012, they decided to take a weekend road trip through northern Arizona. No itinerary, no rules, just a full tank of gas and open highway. They packed light, snacks, an old map, a cooler of cheap beer, and left Phoenix at dawn. By mid-morning, they were winding through red canyons and endless desert. Jake drove. Aaron handled the music. For the first few hours, everything was perfect, the kind of road trip that felt like freedom, until they stopped for gas outside a town that didn't appear on the map. The station looked abandoned. The paint was peeling from the walls, the windows were caked in dust, and the neon sign flickered so faintly it was hard to tell if it was on or just catching sunlight. Jake pulled up to the only pump and got out. The air smelled like rust and dry weeds. "Think this thing still works?" he asked. Aaron shrugged. "Try it. Worst case, we're siphoning from a tractor." The pump did work, barely. Gas trickled into the tank like molasses. Jake went inside to pay while Aaron stayed in the car, scrolling through his phone. Inside, the place felt wrong. No music, no hum of refrigeration, just stillness. There was a single man behind the counter, thin, gray hair, expression blank. Jake handed him a 20. "Pump 2. The old man didn't answer. He just looked at Jake for a long moment, eyes unfocused, then slowly said, "You boys be careful on this road." Jake forced a smile. "Yeah, sure. Thanks." As he turned to leave, the man added quietly, "Don't pick up anyone after dark." Jake told Aaron about it when he got back to the car, laughing it off. "Creepy old guy's been watching too many horror movies." Aaron grinned. "We'll make sure to only pick up hitchhikers before dark." They drove on, joking, the tension fading with the miles. But somewhere past Flagstaff, the radio started cutting out. The GPS stopped working. And as the sun sank below the horizon, the temperature dropped sharply. By the time they hit the stretch of highway near the Coconino Forest, the sky was black. They hadn't seen another car in over an hour. At 9:47 p.m., Aaron saw the figure. A man walking along the side of the road, thumb out, head down. "Dude," Aaron said, pointing. "Look at that." Jake slowed the car. The man was wearing jeans and a long dark coat, his face hidden by the brim of a hat. He wasn't carrying a bag. "Should we?" Aaron began. Jake cut him off. "We're not stopping. Remember what the gas guy said." But as they passed, Aaron glanced in the side mirror and froze. The man had turned his head, and he was smiling. Not just smiling, grinning, wide and unnatural, teeth too bright in the dark. Aaron shuddered. "Okay, yeah, keep driving." They drove for another 20 minutes before Jake realized the temperature inside the car had dropped. He turned up the heat. Nothing happened. "Did the AC break?" he muttered. Then Aaron said, quietly, "Jake, look in the mirror." Jake glanced up, and his stomach dropped. In the back seat, someone was sitting. A man, head bowed, hat covering his face. Jake slammed the brakes, the car skidding to the shoulder. He spun around, but the back seat was empty. No one there, just the smell of something faintly metallic. Aaron's voice shook. "Tell me you saw that." Jake didn't answer. He threw the car into gear and gunned it. They didn't talk for a long time. The road stretched endlessly ahead, black and silent. Finally, Aaron whispered, "He was in the car, Jake. I swear." "I know," Jake said. His voice was tight, strained. "I saw him too." They decided to pull off at the next motel, just to get some sleep. But the next sign they saw, gas and lodging 15 miles, looked old, half buried in weeds. 15 miles felt like forever. The farther they drove, the thicker the fog became. It rolled across the highway like smoke, swallowing the desert on both sides. And then, from somewhere behind them, came the sound of footsteps. Not outside, inside the car. Slow, deliberate. From the back seat, Aaron turned, flashlight in hand, and for just a second, he saw it again. A man's reflection in the rear window. Grinning, they reached the motel at nearly midnight. A squat building called Canyon View Inn. Only 3 cars in the parking lot. A neon vacancy sign buzzed above the office. Inside, the clerk looked half asleep. He handed them a key without a word. Room 12. Jake collapsed on the bed, still shaking. "We're leaving at sunrise," he said. Aaron nodded, but neither of them slept. Every time they started to drift off, they'd hear something. A faint knock on the wall, a creak in the hallway, whispering just beneath the static of the old TV. At 3:12 a.m., Aaron sat up suddenly. Someone was standing outside their door. The shadow stretched across the thin curtains. A knock, 3 times. Jake whispered, "Don't answer." The handle turned, slowly, and from the other side of the door came a low, rasping voice. "You left me on the road." Jake lunged forward, locking the chain. "Go away," he shouted. The voice didn't move. Then the knocking started again, but from the inside wall behind their bed. 3 slow knocks. Aaron grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the window. The curtain fluttered from a cold draft, and for an instant, he saw a face pressed against the glass. White, grinning, they left before dawn. Neither spoke as they threw their bags into the trunk and peeled out of the parking lot. For the first hour, they drove in silence. Then Jake said, "We're almost out of gas." He glanced at the gauge, empty. But before Aaron could respond, he saw a sign ahead. "Gas 1 mile." Same font, same style, the same sign from before. Jake slowed, confused. The same gas station came into view, even though they'd driven over 200 miles away. The same peeling walls, the same flickering sign. And standing beside the pump was the man in the dark coat. Jake slammed the brakes. "No, no way." The man raised his hand slowly, palm open, gesturing toward them. Aaron whispered, "He wants us to stop." Jake hit the gas instead. The car roared past, tires spitting gravel. But as they sped away, Aaron glanced back and screamed. The man was sitting in their back seat again. Only this time he wasn't smiling. He leaned forward, whispering in Aaron's ear, "I told you not to leave me." The car swerved violently. Jake lost control. The world spun. Headlights, dust, metal shrieking, and then everything went black. The police report was simple. Single vehicle accident. 2 fatalities. Both men were found near an unmarked stretch of highway outside Winslow, Arizona. Their car was totaled, engine still running. And though the windshield was shattered and both front seats were empty, the back seat was perfectly intact, except for a single dusty handprint on the window. The responding officer mentioned something else in his notes. When the tow truck driver turned the key to move the vehicle, the radio flickered on for a second. Over the static, a voice whispered, "Thanks for the ride." A year later, a new user on Reddit, u/roadtripruin, posted the story. He said he'd found it scribbled in a torn notebook at a crash site off Route 87. At the end of the post, he wrote, "If you ever drive through northern Arizona at night, and you see a man walking by the road, don't look at him, don't stop, and whatever you do, don't check your back seat." Story 4. The Missing Thread. Posted by u/lastpostleft, 2018. It started with a thread. Back in 2018, I was obsessed with Reddit's r/let's not meet. Those first-hand true horror stories about strangers, stalkers, and near misses. I'd scroll for hours every night, long after midnight, reading about people who swore they'd brushed against something evil. It was addictive. One evening, around 1:40 a.m., I saw a post titled, "Don't read this thread twice." It wasn't flashy. No upvotes, no comments, posted maybe 10 minutes earlier by a user named u/redrighthand. The name stuck out to me, though poetic, biblical. I clicked it. The story was simple. The poster claimed that 2 years earlier, they'd been reading our/Let's Not Meet and found a thread that wouldn't stop changing. Every time they refreshed the page, new sentences appeared. Lines about them, what they were wearing, even what they were thinking. It said the story had ended with a single sentence that appeared on its own. You shouldn't have read this far. Then the post said their screen went black. When they rebooted their laptop, the thread was gone. Creepy, sure. But I'd read hundreds of cursed post stories before. This one was well written, though, and the comments were already filling with people saying they couldn't find the thread in the user's history anymore. I refreshed. The story had changed. Now, in the second paragraph, it mentioned a reader. Someone who'd read it too late at night, in a dim room, sitting beside a flickering light. My chest tightened. That's exactly what I was doing. I scrolled down fast, thinking maybe it was a glitch. Another refresh. Another change. Now, there was a new sentence. He just looked over his shoulder. I froze, because I had maybe 30 seconds before. My brain scrambled for an explanation. Maybe it was a live-updating ARG? A creepypasta game? I checked the username again, u/redrighthand, but now it read, deleted. I went to the comments. They were all gone, replaced with a single message. Stop refreshing. I slammed my laptop shut so hard the screen flickered. For a full minute, I just sat there, listening to the hum of the fridge from the kitchen, my heart hammering. When I reopened Reddit, the post was gone. Completely. Even search links led nowhere. I told myself it was probably a mod takedown or prank. But a part of me couldn't shake the way it had mentioned me. The next morning, my Reddit feed looked normal, except for one new notification. u/redrighthand replied to your comment. But I hadn't commented. When I clicked it, the page loaded a blank post, completely white except for one line of text in the middle. Check your drafts. I didn't even know Reddit had drafts, but I looked anyway. And there it was, a post titled, "Don't read this thread twice," saved under my own username. I opened it. It was identical to the one I'd read the night before, except it was written in my voice. My details, my room, my reactions, every line describing exactly what I'd done, all the way up to me slamming the laptop shut. The last sentence was new. He's about to post this again. My hand hovered over the mouse, trembling. And then, before I could even think, the post disappeared from drafts. That day, I couldn't focus. I deleted my cache, cleared cookies, even changed my password. But when I checked my profile that night, the same post was live again, posted from my account. And the timestamp? 1:41 a.m., exactly 24 hours after the original. Comments were already appearing. This isn't funny. OP, stop. Are you repeating someone else's story? I tried to delete it. Reddit wouldn't let me. Every time I hit delete, the site froze. When I finally managed to refresh, a new comment sat at the top. Don't delete what isn't yours. At that point, I shut my PC off and decided to go to bed. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint clicking sound. Mechanical, repetitive. I thought it was my mouse. But when I turned on the monitor, my Reddit page was open again. A blank draft. Title, The Missing Thread. And the typing cursor was moving on its own. Letter by letter, it wrote, "He's reading this again. He can hear me typing. He's not alone." I jumped up, heart slamming. The clicking continued for several seconds, even after I yanked the monitor's power cord. Then silence. For a few days, nothing else happened. I deleted Reddit, stayed offline, told myself it was a virus or a keylogger prank. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me off the site. It started with notifications, even though my account was deleted. Emails with subject lines like, "We saw your post. Check your thread. It's waiting." The senders were random. Strings of numbers, letters, and sometimes just null. And one night, after ignoring them for weeks, curiosity got me again. I opened the latest email. It had no body text, just one attachment, a plain text file named missing.txt. Inside it said, "It's still your turn." That same night, I woke up to my phone's notification sound. Reddit. I didn't even have the app installed anymore. When I looked, the screen showed the Reddit logo, except it was inverted, black on red, pulsing faintly. A message loaded beneath it. "Someone is reading your story." Then my camera turned on. No warning, no permission prompt. Just static for a moment. And then the faint outline of a face in the darkness behind me, watching from the corner of my room. I don't remember what happened after that. I woke up on the floor hours later. The phone screen cracked. My laptop open again on Reddit. The post, "The Missing Thread," was at the top of our /let's not meet. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments. But when I tried to scroll down, they all said the same thing. "I read this before. It's looping. OP, stop reposting this." Except I hadn't posted it. Not this time. I went to the bathroom mirror, my hands still shaking, and noticed something that nearly made me vomit. There, etched faintly into the skin of my forearm, red, irritated like a burn, were the words, "Don't read this twice." I moved out of that apartment a month later, deleted every trace of Reddit, changed my number, my devices, everything. For years, I tried to convince myself it was some deep-fake viral experiment or a hallucination brought on by lack of sleep. But 2 nights ago, a friend sent me a link. It was a Reddit post. Title, "Don't read this thread twice." Posted by you/last post left. My account. Except I haven't logged in since 2018. And the first line of the post said, "He thought it was over." These stories came from real people. Some are still on Reddit. Some deleted their accounts, and some were never heard from again. When you scroll through Reddit late at night, remember, not every story is written after it happens. Some are written while it's still happening.